All right. Let's see. We are back. Let's just make sure the audio is working before I send out the link. Nice. Hmm. All right. So, open panel, join live chat. Let's see. All right. So I think we're back on, and I think you guys are hearing me. So let's see how how this is gonna work. This is hilarious. Um, let me just let's see. Copy invite link. I can also just share the live. Um, yeah. All right. So all right, so let's see. We're gonna try this and see how it works. I think there are a few people who came over, but at least it's gonna be online and it's gonna be shared at that point. So I'm gonna be going between my screens and seeing how that goes. Let me see if I could get the sharing up. Um, where is my Right. So we're going to go back to, okay, so that's it. So just give me a holler if you are there and you are seeing and hearing. I put the information in the groups. Let's see if everybody is all right. So let me see if others are coming over. And I'll give everybody a couple minutes to kind of make the switch. I can't believe this is just it's one of those days. Oh my goodness. Ah, all right. And so I have to go between the YouTube and um let's see. Ah, okay, lovely. So I'm on and we're going and um I think we can get we can get sorted out now. Listen, guys, I'm putting you guys through so much stuff. Thank you for making the shift and all of that. And this is going to be on YouTube. I'm going to do I take it down? Do I leave it? I might have to do this episode over again just so that it'll kind of make sense to everybody else. Ah, and all the while this is happening, my phone is just ringing, 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 ringing. Remember, I said my mom was at hospital, so the hospital tried to reach me. I answered all their questions, and yeah, so we're having a good time today. All right, so I'm sharing screen and we're getting started. Okay, so in a case like this, imagine now all of this is happening, right? And imagine students are going to be experiencing all kinds of different things heading into exams. And we're looking at the issue of they're going into exams, all kinds of stuff is going through their head, and they're meeting these worded problems, which they're not a fan of to begin with. And so they might be concentrating so hard on all these things. And then, the drama happens, right? And so what um what we're going to be looking at is how we can help the students sort of navigate these worded problems in a way that allows them to um have a pattern, have a system, have a strategy to work with them, right? And so we're going to be talking about something called 6D flow. And the thing with it is that it's really not like, a brand new system kind of thing. It's just really labeling an effective format in a way that students could memorize it and they'd be able to really kind of make sense of things and so it'll be root and come naturally to them. Because one of the challenges that students have is that I hear parents and teachers say this all the time. Students make silly mistakes. Now, the issue with a silly mistake, and we call it silly because we think, okay, the student should already know this. Um, the thing with it is that a couple things could be happening. The student could be worried about the exam. The student could be rushing through because they don't have a system and they're, running things off the top of their heads. It could be an issue of students just really feeling overwhelmed. And the point of dealing with worded problems is not that, okay, you're teaching the multiplication or you're teaching the division or the processes or the operations. At this point, these are things students are supposed to know, but they know those things and still get some of the worded problems wrong. And that's because it comes down to interpreting the words and following the steps. And so We are running. Let me just do two things before I move forward and get into it because I want to make sure everybody gets the information. So you could either go to the web, you can go to Zoom, you can go to let me see. Here's the new link. As for YouTube, let me make sure I put it on my page, Word Coach Youth. So if you're having trouble with finding it, you know where to get it. Um, all right, so as soon as I'm finished that, I'll get back into the to what it is we're talking about today. Yeah, why is today being so technically challenged? Stop that. Oh, goodness gracious. You just have to laugh at these things sometimes, because when I tell you, if you really, you know, decide to, um, get into all the things that could go wrong, mm, you'd never end it. All right, so hopefully as many people find it as possible. Okay, so let's go to before we get to that, let's go to the reminders that I was going to share. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly so that we can get to the meat of what it is you're here for, which is understanding the worded problems and how to help your child or students with the worded problems. Okay. Um, the this week, today is Tuesday. I started my workshops yesterday, and the first workshop had to do with feedback. And what I realized in the discussion is that, teachers and parents, especially teachers in the classroom, work really hard to give students information about what is going on with their writing. But quite often it is not, it's like, it's almost as if it's going in one ear and coming out the other with the student. And you wonder, okay, why aren't they listening to the feedback? Why aren't they acting on the feedback? Usually it's because the feedback isn't as clear and actionable as you might think it is. And so that's what we're going through in this workshop yesterday and today. And I realized that we really do misinterpret feedback quite a lot. And feedback is absolutely critical for improving writing. So that's something I'm going to put a little bit more effort into making sure that I share exactly how both teachers and parents can give effective feedback. Um, and while I was working on preparing for this session, I realized that there's a fun way to teach everything, even worded math problems. And I I mean, I guess I came into this session with a whole lot of anxiety, and then you guys not hearing me just made the whole thing worse. So if I explain to you the kind of pain in my chest I have right now, you would wonder why I'm still here. But I know it's anxiety. And so how I deal with it is doing that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 that I've shown you before. And that is definitely something that students need to be able to practice because a lot of these silly mistakes, as we call them, stem from students being anxious. And sometimes when they're anxious, what they do is that they rush through things because they're relying on what they think they know and they're not implementing a step-by-step process. The thing with writing as well as these worded problems is not just a matter of knowing what you know. Many of these, you have to go through a process in order to get the answer. And if we skip the process, and for the creative writing, if we skip the plotting, we're going to end up into trouble. If we skip the planning for reports, we're going to end up into trouble. And if we skip the process with the worded problems, students end up into trouble and then they get the incorrect answers because they're not going through a system. And so you want to present that system, and you can find it if you just do a Google search, a system for dealing with worded problems. Most of them tell you the same thing. You start by reading the question, then you identify what the question is asking you to do. You kind of brainstorm the situation, then you create a formula to work out the answer. You work it out, and then you double check and so on. So there's a process that you would need to go through, anybody would need to go through when they're doing the worded problems. Not many students understand that process or are aware of going through that process. And once they get that knowledge and they're able to go through it, it'll be slowly at first, but as they get it, they would be able to just look at things and go through the process really quickly. But in the beginning, it might feel a little bit challenging. And so that's when we have to present things in a way that feel fun and interesting to the students. And so now that we're going through, I'm going to show you some of these step by step and some of the things that you would need to work on with your students to really get them to understand the worded problems. And then we will actually go through a couple of problems so you would see what I'm talking about. And then finally it occurred to me that, I hear it all the time. People say, I didn't know you had this, I didn't know you had that. Do you have such and such? And I'm definitely going to spend the next 2 weeks after this session and I recover from all the glitches and the dramas before. Then I will I'm going to, spend some time working on really letting everybody know what information I have and all the worksheets that come out from the presentations and the workshops that I'm doing. Which reminds me, when it comes to the workshops, this is the one that I was talking about, giving the feedback. So we did this last evening, and today we're going to go through the forms and actually go through narratives and reports so that I'll demonstrate how you can analyze things quickly, excuse me, and be able to give the feedback effectively to, get the student to act on the feedback. And it starts with making sure the criteria is clear and so on. So if you want to get more information about this, even though this workshop is past, let me know. I'm thinking of putting them together so that people can access, teachers and parents can access them on demand rather than waiting until I'm available again. Starting tomorrow, we're going to look at sentence structure. We're looking at sentence starters, story transitions, and joining sentences. And I'm focused mainly on narratives for this workshop, but I will mention here and there a little bit about reports so that you could see how it works both ways. But we're really focusing on narratives for this one. Then we're going to talk about the descriptive writing, character description, description in action, and descriptive writing worksheets. This one focuses a lot on setting. So you're getting setting, character, and some principles that you can work with. And these, worksheets included. So if you're tired of hearing um, teachers say, oh, you're tired of writing, add more description, then this workshop is for you. And then finally, we're looking at how to teach boring stories. So notice that I have two separate workshops, one on description and one on boring stories. Because contrary to what a lot of people think, adding in descriptions is not the way to make a story exciting. What actually makes a story exciting would be this here, increasing the tension and sharing emotions. And so there are ways to do it, and this workshop shows you how to do that, plus gives you some worksheets that you could use with your child or your students. So these are for next week. So if this is something that would benefit you, then, definitely um, send me a WhatsApp message, or you can just go to wordcoach.com /courses and you would get their registration form. All right. Oh, and finally, because I'm not doing any workshops or courses for students this December, I'm available to do one-on-ones where I could give you the analysis, detailed breakdown of what your child needs, and create an outline for them to deal with that for the rest of the vacation. So going into January, they'd be at the top of their game with the creative writing. At this point, for many students, it's just simply a matter of knowing what to do and how to do it. So they need the kind of feedback that I was just talking about, that actionable feedback, and that's what I can provide. And so if you're interested, again, you could reach out to me, WhatsApp. My number is here, 717-4993. Okay, so now we are finally into the worded problems. And I do have to say thank you for those of you who were able to make the switch. I put the links in different places, so hopefully everyone would be able to come over, those who were here before. Um, so let's start with understanding what the worded problems are. And the reason we're starting with a definition is that last part, well, the last two lines in that definition, because those are the two most important aspects of creating a strategy for helping students understand how to address worded problems. So we do need to understand what a worded problem is. So the first thing is that the worded problems are math questions presented as real life scenarios or stories, requiring students to interpret the text, identify key information, use appropriate operations to solve the math problems. So just in that, we have four steps that students are required to perform just with the fact that it's a worded problem and not just numbers. And so understanding that means that it's not a matter of, just figure it out or you should know or anything like that. Students have to interpret. And because of that, there's a lot of reading and comprehension involved here. And that is what really creates the problems for the students. And so when we look at it, the challenges come from three places, right? So the first is the language that we spoke about. So students struggle to understand keywords and phrasing that indicate specific math operations. So they read it and they're like, what am I supposed to do here? And that's because they don't recognize the words that are used. The second thing is the problems often require multiple steps. And when it's not presented in numbers only, students can miss a step because what they actually have to do is to interpret the scenario and figure out what steps are required. Because the question is really want to ask one thing. You have to present one answer. But in order to get to that answer, quite often you have to do a few things before you even get to that point. And so this is what we talk about in terms of that step. And then finally, of course, we spoke about this interpretation. Maybe I should have put interpretation on top because that's like the core of everything. We are trying now to get students to convert these real world um, situations into mathematical equations. So we're looking at reducing a situation to numbers. And one of the things that I discussed in the workshop last night in terms of feedback was the issue of students generalizing and not doing sufficient critical analysis to get to the details. And that is what shows up here. And is why students have trouble with this interpretation because they're not analyzing things. And so the idea of getting them to critically analyze, it works across the board. So when you get them to do that with the math and you get them to do that with the creative writing, it works together. So they kind of go hand in hand because we're always talking about the details. What are the details involved? We need details for reports, we need details for narratives, and we need details to understand the worded problems. But how do we get these details? We get these details with words. And so being able to make that connection between the details and the words, that is what's going to create a challenge the most for students. So how do we begin dealing with this? So we have three aspects to the problem. And so we need, at the very least, three aspects to the solution. And so the first part of it is to make sure that they understand the language. And this is not something that you're going to be able to do simply by, going online and getting the the solution, getting a list of things, because the way the information is often presented is that the student, so some words are used in particular ways that you yourself, you're going to have to start keeping a list, because you can start off with, let me see, I have a document here that, if you go online, you would see things like, um, where is it? Like this one, yeah, where you have the question, you have the words that are associated with multiplication, words are associated with division, and so on. So you can get a copy of something like this, and all you have to do is to search keywords used in math worded problems, and you would get them in a list like this. But as you go, you really want to have students recognizing how they appear in um how they appear in like an actual question. And so you start off with something like this, but you really want to go to the questions themselves and have the students go through the questions and see what words come up and what each word means in the question. So you're starting there because remember again, a worded problem is not only about the math. A worded problem is about interpretation, it's about following steps, and it's about recognizing what words mean. And many students fall short in that area. They do well with the math, all the other questions, but when it comes to the worded questions, this is what happens. So we need to have that. And so you start with a handout, like the one I showed you, and then you keep a journal where you add to the handout so that you want the student to write it out because, of course, that writing it out presents some structure for them. And then you want to um, add as you go. So when you encounter a question that poses an additional challenge, have the student write out, okay, what's the key word that you didn't quite get in this one? Write it out, write what it means. And so we have that process. So that empowers the student to take charge of their own learning, and they are developing systems and strategies to help them do their best as they go. And then, of course, you want to use a systematic approach like the one I'm going to show you. And then one of the best ways that I find, and this is where it begins to feel a little bit more fun, is when we create situations and we kind of round out the context of the question that's happening. And so I remember in SEA Peaceful Approach, somebody had asked a question about a store having um, a double 10 sale, and the person paid, they gave them the savings amount, and they wanted to know what was the original price and with the double 10. And so immediately my mind went to double 10. We have in Trinidad the 10th of October, we have that double 10 sale. And so immediately my mind went there and I thought, somebody trying to macro somebody business to find out how much they could have spent for this double 10 sale. And when we make little jokes like this and we put it in the context and we make it feel more than just, this arbitrary thing that is being interpreted, students feel a little bit more engaged with the questions and they're able to understand context and therefore interpret better. So, really and truly, working with these worded questions, we're starting off by making sure students understand the context and they're able to go through the process with that 6D flow, and that's going to help them really make sense out of what it is they're reading and what it is they have to do, and therefore answer questions more accurately. So it's not just about getting the numbers. You go in, with this analytical mind and you get the numbers, and some students work like that. And if your child works like that, then that's what you do, because we're always working with what benefits the students most. But creating that context does a lot more for students who don't think so analytically, and it actually gives them a process and a context to think analytically and critically, which is what ultimately we're trying to teach them here. And so this is what the process that we do. So what is this 6D flow that I'm talking about? It's literally called 6D because it's a six-step process that each part of the process begins with the letter D. And so you want to start with defining or a definition. So you're asking yourself, what is the goal of this problem? What is the question really and truly asking me? What do I have to present as my answer? What is the examiner looking for here? All of those kinds of questions. And then what we want to do is to dig deeper to kind of identify the keywords that guide us to what the operations are. And then we begin understanding the levels of the process that would be involved. And then we design the solution, which is where we pull out the numbers and we use the symbols to help us with the equation that we're going to create, or the different levels of the equation that we're going to create. And then we do the math. So we write out the equation. After we distill and we interpret and we understand what's going on, we reduce it to numbers, and that's step by step. And then we do the math. We run the calculations. And after we run the calculation, we double check. And so we're double checking to reinforce accuracy, because we want to know, okay, does it work backward? If I am asked, how much does this one get? And I get an answer, can I put the answer into the question and it work out flush? And so we do have to show students how to work backward as well in their double checking. So their double checking is not just reading through what they have written to come up with the answer, because they could still miss an issue in their working if they're just reading it over. How do you actually double check? Your double checking means putting your answer into the question once it's one of those multi-step questions to see if it works back flush, right? And so there's that activity there for the double check. And then finally, you deliver the answer. You want to make sure it's clear and that you're using the correct units. So maybe I should put that instead. Let's say clear solution with correct units. So if the question is asking you for money, you put the answer in money. If the question is asking you for meters, you put the answer in meters. So, you want to make sure that you deliver the answer effectively. And so we have this 6D flow, and it's something that I'm going to expand on and, add some more details to it so that we can get a complete understanding of the process. But I have to share something with you that this morning, when I was going through it, and I thought, we need to find a way to make this exciting, because I know I could do it in certain ways in my class, but then how do I share with others how to make it less tedious for the students? And so I thought of the idea of having like 6D Flow. That's a rap name, so he's a performer and he's this math whiz. And so one of the ways that students could really go through the process and memorize the process is by, putting it into, it's kind of like a poem. They could rap it out, put music to it, and having the students add their own music and vibe to it kind of helps them own it. And so the I I went to I asked ChatGPT to help me out with this and it gave me something. And so between the two of us, I made some changes and this is what we ended up with. And so I would not even pretend to try to rap it because that is, but the students could recite it like a poem or something, and that way they'd be able to memorize it because it has the rhyming scheme and all those things. So, yo, I'm 6D. I've got the math flow. 6 steps to solve. Here's how it'll go. First, define what you need to find, then dig deeper, keywords in the mind. Design a solution, make a plan so tight, do the math, get your answer right. Double check, did it all make sense? Deliver it clear with your mad confidence. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm thinking, definitely going to be using this. If anybody asks me about how to deal with worded problems, we're going to be working with that because this is just like a really easy way for students to remember what it is they're supposed to do. And again, remember, when they're just starting, it might take a little longer than you would like, but after time and practice, these things are going to come really quickly. So, for example, defining what you need to find, like what is the question actually asking me to do? What should my answer look like? With practice, they'd be able to just scan it and come up with it just like that. In the beginning, you're going to need to model it and show them, but after a while, they're going to come up with it pretty quickly. And so once they have that idea of, 6D flow, they can memorize it and be able to remember what to do. So you're not just telling them, okay, 6D, step one, step two, step three. Present it in a fun way that they can memorize it because it's all about being able to perform actions quickly. Not at the beginning, we give them the time, but in the end, we want them to do these things quickly because it's a timed exam, right? And so they don't always have the luxury of taking the time and flipping pages and doing things slowly. They need the practice. And we're starting with giving them this step-by-step action that they can memorize and follow. And so this is the 6D flow. And so let's start looking at some of the questions and how we're going to use that 6D flow. And remember, where did I should probably, let's make a note of it. So if you go back up, let me go back up to the 6D. I'll go here. Um, So you want to start with the define. So what is the question asking? Then we want to dig deeper to get the keywords. And actually, there are some processes as I was doing the research on this that ask you to dig deeper before you define, because digging deeper can help you figure out what it is the question is actually asking you. So step one and two, you can do it in this order, define first and then dig deeper, or you could dig deeper and then define. It's kind of interchangeable like that. It depends on how the student processes. Whichever one works best for you, you can use that one. And then when you design this solution, that's when you're putting things on paper. So you're saying, okay, we have this and we have that, and then we're doing it. And then we want to do the math, which is actually running the calculation. Then we're going to double check, and then we're going to deliver the answer, right? So that's the process that we're going to follow. So if we go down now to this question, so I have, I think, 4 questions here, different levels of difficulty, so that we can see how it can apply to worded problems in general, the 6D flow. So this is the first question. John collected 8 mangoes yesterday and 12 mangoes today. what is the total number of mangoes John has? So we're looking at total and has. So total would mean all together, which suggests addition, and has we're thinking possession, ownership, that kind of thing, and we're specifically looking at John. And so, what is the question asking us? What's the total full amount that John has? And so, let's look at, so we've done the first two, define and dig deeper. Now we are designing the solution. So we know yesterday we had 8, and because we're looking for total, today he has 12. So we're adding, and then we have, so this is our design, right? So the 8 plus 12, that would be design the solution. And then we do the math. So we add up the two and we get 20. And then we double check to make sure that we've added it properly. That's the fifth one. And then when we're presenting our answer, what are we going to put? 20 mangoes, because we want to make sure that our answer is using the correct unit. So, right, when we deliver the answer, we want to make sure it uses the correct unit. So even in a very simple worded problem, we're following that 6D. And you see how quickly the 6D process would go through once the student memorizes it and they understand that they're going through the 6 steps, then they have a strategy that they could fall back on even when they're flustered or when they're a little anxious. They know, okay, define, dig deeper, design, do the math, double check, deliver. Right? So, and then we get our answer here. So let's look at one that's a little bit more challenging. And this one we have, for every 5 plums Megan picks. Now, I got this one from, excuse me, I took this from SEA Peacefield. So this was in a practice test at some point. For every 5 plums Megan picks, Nalissa picks 2 more plums. How many plums will Nalissa pick if Megan picked 30 plums? Now, this is a multi-step problem, right? And so the first thing we do is, what are we trying to find out here? So what's the answer required? Um, Nalissa's total plums, right? That's what the answer is. So that's what we're defining. So we have to kind of interpret how many plums will Nalissa pick if Megan. So we have it in a whole sentence, but we want to pull out what the actual question is. And the actual question is just how many plums will Nalissa pick? So we have a context if Megan picks 30, but we are really focusing on Nalissa's plums. And so that's what we work out there, total plums. And then so we look at the some of the keywords in the question, because now we're digging deeper to find out what do we know, what does the question have in it? And um so like digging deeper is like figuring out the starting point. So we know for every, which suggests some kind of ratio or proportion, or we have like a set, then 2 more, that means we're adding 2 to every set. Then we're looking at how many, so we need a specific quantity. We can also look at if, which shows a condition that creates context. And so when you're working with the student, you want to help the student kind of process these things. So again, it's going to take a little while to get started and have them see all these different sections. And so now we're going to design the solution. So to design the solution, we have to know what we start with. So we're looking at Megan has 5, right? But then we have to add the 2 for every 5 that um, Megan picks. How many would Nelissa pick? We have to add the 2. So now we have 7. That's part of the process, right? That's what we know because that's what the question told us. And then when Megan picks 30, the question is, how many does Nelissa pick? Now, a student might think at this point, I could just add 2 because it's 2 more if they're misinterpreting what is happening here. But because of this, for every 5, once they recognize for every and they realize that we're creating a set, then what are they going to do? When she has 30 plums, how many sets of 5s does that create or does that include? Right? And so we're not working with just the raw numbers here because of this section that says for every. And so this is why students recognizing what the words mean and what the language means in the question makes a difference. Because a student seeing for every 5 immediately thinks, oh, this is a set of something. And so when I think 30, that's not 30 set, that is 30 plums altogether. But I'm working with a set here. So I have to figure out how many sets. That's going to be part of the process of me coming to this answer. So how do we get this set? We divide. I don't have the divisions here, so I'm going to just do the slash, right? By the 5, and that would give us 6. So we have 6 sets. And then remember, for every 5, Nelissa picks 7. So now to get the answer, we're going to multiply the set, total number of sets, by the actual number of plums for Nelissa. So we have 6 sets by 7 plums per set. And then we would get the answer here. And so we're in designing this solution, we're looking at number of sets versus number of plums. And then what are we going to get? 6 sevens are 42. No, that's not a 2. Right. So if how many plums will Nelissa pick if Megan picked 30? The answer is 42. But how do we get there? We don't get there just by using the numbers in the question. We have to interpret what does each number refer to. And so students definitely need to understand what like different terms mean. So 2 more means that we're adding 2 more to each set, not 2 more overall, because of these words for every, right? And so this is how we're breaking it down and using that 6D. So we define what are we looking for? Melissa's total plums. We're digging deeper. So when we see the word for every, we know, okay, this is a set. So one set equals 5 plums from Megan, but how many does one set equal in plums for Nelissa? We add 2 to the 5, and that's how we would get. So 7 plums per set for um for Nelissa, and we can, make the note 5 plums per set for Melissa. And so how many sets in 30 plums? We do the 30 divided by the 5, and then we know that we have 6 sets. And then, so we know we're looking at multiplying it out for Nelissa. And so I'm kind of struggling here with the screen and typing it up instead of handwriting it. But you get the idea in terms of the process. So these are the steps in the process. So we first have to find out how many sets. So we know 5 plums per set for Melissa. We have to find out how many plums per set for sorry, for Megan. Now for Melissa, then how many sets in the 30 plums altogether. We find that, and then we could do the calculation after. And so what's the process? Define, what do I need to know? We dig deeper so we get to understand all of these things, what the numbers mean, what words we have to pay attention to, um, what, the context, and so on. And then, of course, we are paying attention to the actual numbers. But the key to worded problems is that students should never just look at the worded problem and assume that a number means something. They always have to take the numbers in context, because we know now that this number 5 means a set, and this 2 is 2 more, and not just 2 to add to the 30 to get 32. It doesn't quite work like that, because each number represents something else based on what the words say. And so this is how the words come into play, and why it is you definitely need to start off with that printout, but also look at it in context and show students how the words show up and how they work out in that context. So let's check another one. So, right, I think this one. So I got this one from Peacefield as well. So cloth is sold at $9 for 3 meters. So again, this was in a practice test. $9 for 3 meters at the factory, and 450 per meter at the store. How much money is saved when 15 meters of cloth is bought at the factory rather than the store? So a student could read this and think, huh? Like store, factories. So we go through the process. We ask ourselves, we're defining, what are we trying to find out? Right? So let's put, what are we really asking for? What's the question? We want to know how much is saved. So we don't want to know the cost of the 15 meters at the store or the cost of the 15 meters at the factory. We want to know how much is saved. And what does saved mean? Saved would mean what's the difference between the two? And when we hear the word difference, what do we understand difference to be? Subtraction. So at the end of it, we know that subtraction is part of the equation. But what are we subtracting? Now we have to dig deeper. We have to look at the cost at the factory. We have to look at cost at the store. And then we have to look at, how much we're going to spend at each place before we get there. And that we're only going to know that if we dig deeper. And digging deeper means looking at the words that are used and what each word says about the numbers that we're given. Because remember, we're never taking numbers at face value, because the words can change the interpretation, just as we had with the other one where we had a set and we had to work out that set and that grouping. we're going to have to pay attention to what's happening here because $9 for 3 meters and then 450 per meter means what? 1 meter. So we're paying 450 for one, but $9 for three. So then the quantities are not given in the same amount. We have one that is three, one that is one. And so we have to start thinking about that. So an easy way to start to make sense of this as we're digging deeper, we're recognizing all of these things. We could look at, let me make this a little bit smaller so I could have more space to show you, right? So if we're digging deeper, then, so factory per meter, we would have to find that out so we can have the same level and we can match the quantity now. So factory per meter would be how much? How do we calculate that? So we have 9 divided by 3, and then our answer would be 3. So now we know that at the factory, we're really spending $3 per meter. So we know how much 1 meter costs. So now once we get that, it's easier for us to create our equations because the first thing we have to figure out, how much is it going to cost me at the factory for these 15 meters? So I multiply 15 by 3 and I would end up with $45. I also need to figure out how much is going to cost me at the store for 15 meters. So what do I do? 15 meters by 4.5, and then we get our answer, right? And so what is our answer? 67.50, right? And now I want to know how much money is saved. So I haven't got my answer yet because I haven't gotten a figure that tells me what the question is really asking me. So I'm not done. And so that is why I usually tell students, define what the question is asking you first before you dig deeper. Because as you're digging deeper and you get your details, and then you're going through the process of designing the solution, you would know when you come to the answer that you require, because at the back of your head, you know what it is the question is asking you. And for students who need to write things down, you can just write down what is the question asking. And so we know the question is asking the difference. And so how do we calculate the difference? We minus the 45 from the 67.50 and we get 22.50, right? And then so now we know the savings. And so how do we present our answer? We would have to say 22.50 savings because that's what the question is asking about savings. And so again, we deliver, we put the answer in the appropriate wording and the appropriate unit. So when you go through that 6D, you get the define, dig deeper, we design a solution, then we do the math and we double check and then we deliver. We get that. And so the process, that 6D systematic process, helps students go through that step by step. But at each step, what's happening is that you realize that they have to know how to do certain calculations. The thing with the worded problems is that even when you have multiple steps, all it is, you're doing one of four things. You're either going to multiply, or you're going to divide, or you're going to add, or you're going to subtract. So you're going to be doing one of these four functions, probably more than once. So in this case, we multiplied twice, we did a division, we did a subtraction in order to get the answer for this question. And so what's happening here is that, again, we're looking at interpretation. How does a student know which one to perform first and which one to do next? It's because you have to start with what is the question asking? And then how do I get there? So because I know this question is asking me how much was saved, that tells me what? I have to know how much I paid at the factory, and I have to know how much it'll be at the store so that I could figure out what's the difference between the two. But if I didn't know what the question was asking me, I might do some kind of calculation and present an answer or miss part of it. So I might just calculate, what's the cost at the factory and give the price at the factory and leave it at that. But that's not what the question is asking. The question is asking about how you save. And so that's the thing that I want to make sure that it is, you're getting with the worded problems. And I'm going to stop here with this one. But what I'm going to do, I'm definitely going to have to do this again with all the drama that happened this morning. So I'm going to do this session again. And when I do the session again, I'm going to do it with some additional questions, and we would have the actual time to go through it. But I'm hoping that you understand the value in the three different things that I mentioned. You have to know the language, so make sure we know what those keywords mean. We have to recognize that it's a process and there's a step by step. And regardless of what the actual process is, if the students have their own process to follow, their own strategy, they'd be able to identify what's needed. And then you want to be able to, put it in context. So if a student is like really struggling like this, you could say, well, it's Christmas time now, you know, you want to buy curtains, um, you want to make your own curtains, or somebody's mom or auntie or grandma or some dad or cousin or whoever making curtains for Christmas, and they need 15 meters of cloth, and they know it's selling in the factory and it's selling in the store, but they want to get the best price. So in order to get the best price, they have to compare and see if there's a savings and which one, and that's how they're working out the savings. And so you could create a scenario to help the student kind of make sense of things. So we don't want to just say cloth is sold at the factory at this and that. So, Tanti Beatrice want to make curtains, and she knows she could buy the material in the factory for $3 a meter. But when she went to the store, they tell her a whole 450 a meter. And she need 15 meters because she need for the living room, right? And so um how much it'll cost her for the factory, how much for the thing, but she really want to know that. She want to know if she buy it in the factory, if it's cheaper. And how would she know if it's cheaper? By looking at the difference, calculating the difference. And so we can create scenarios and help students kind of visualize it and impact it. They can do artwork, they can draw things, they can do all sorts of things to really get them to internalize the 6D process and to make sense of the words as they're used for their worded problems. All right. So again, let's go back up. Let me remind you of the 6D. You can take a screenshot or perhaps just write it out. The idea is you want students to remember that process. They're not just reading it and reading it over because they have to read it over. what are the actions they must do for each point. So when they define what is the question really asking me, make a note of that. This is what I need to find out. When they're digging deeper, what information are they getting from each, of the numbers that are used? And what are they supposed to do with these numbers? What do these numbers represent? They can make notes about that. And then when they're designing the solution might have different parts because of what it is they need to find out. And so they write that down and then they're working as they're going. And then when they do the math, they get their figures, they double check it, and then they deliver their answer. And so with practice, it it's because of the fact that I know this and in my mind I just look at it and I could tell you these things. It's because I've been practicing with it to see how the flow goes. That's the same thing that's going to happen to a student when they understand this. They'll be able to read it quickly and define less than a few seconds, just a few seconds to identify what the question is asking them. And the defining and the designing of the solution, those two parts will probably take them the longest because they have to note what it is they are calculating. But when they practice, they can do it and work it out while they're going because they would understand how to work the system and how to understand that process. And then they can double check their answers pretty quickly because they've gone through the process and they have written it down. And so this is something that if your students or your child, they're really struggling with the worded problems, try this out and let me know how it works out. Um, any worded problem, from the simple ones, as I showed you, where you have like one part to the equation, to the more complicated ones that have several parts to the equation, it all can fall into this 6D flow that really helps students to critically analyze, look at the process, and understand how things are going. So I hope it's helpful. And like I said, I'm going to have to do this again because of all the glitches that happened earlier. I'm definitely going to have to do this again. And so the next time I'll figure it out and, we can get started. Everybody would get the information as needed. All right. So now because I am not in my usual place, how do I get out of yeah, so before I go, I almost forgot. I need to remind you about the workshops. Um, Remember, I'm doing the workshops. Now, these workshops are on creative writing, right? How to teach sentence structure that begins tomorrow. You can still register if you like. The descriptive writing, where you get character setting and some strategies. The boring stories issue. You can get information on how to teach about emotions and so on. And with each of these, I'm going to be introducing some activities, some of the activities that I do with the students, so you can see and experience how it works. So if you're a teacher, you can do it with your students. If you're a parent, you can do it with your child. Because the idea is that, just as with the math where we had 6D flow, he's a rapper, math, and all those things. We want to present this information in a way that students find enjoyable, and so they won't be too stressed about it. We want students to move from actually hating the writing to wanting to finish and enjoying the writing about their stories. Okay, so thank you very much for those of you who may able to make the switch and to stick out all the glitches and remain till the end. I sincerely appreciate you more than I can say. Really, more than I could say. You made a really difficult situation this morning manageable. Okay, have a wonderful rest of the evening. I'll let you know when I'm going to do it again. It'll probably not be next week, Tuesday, but I'll confirm the date and time for you. Okay.